Welcome back. Now, what is a decolonized Africa? Well, that is a very pertinent question that will be answered at the end of the panel discussion, of course, at the Soweto Theatre and at the Johannesburg Theatre, beg your pardon. Well, this is a question that young writers will hope to have answered at the end of that discussion, featuring Jamaican-American poet, essayist, playwright and editor, Professor Claudia Rankin at the Joburg Theatre and Soweto Theatres on the 13th and 14th of June. Now, the Department of Arts and Culture has, of course, partnered with award-winning writer, filmmaker and photographer Mqombothi and journalist, blogger, activist Masola to unpack and delve into the sentiments of the current wave of social media hashtags and hear what the voices of the accomplished young writers are. And, Mqombothi and Masola join us to tell us more about their role in the panel discussion and their thoughts on what role literature has indeed played in the formation of ideas and movements for change. A very good morning to you too. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, Dudumalingani, I'm going to start with you. Take us through the panel discussion. What is it that you aim to achieve from it?
I mean, first of all, I'm not sure if by the end of the panel we would have answered that question, but I think the panel's sort of role for me is to make an attempt at answering that question, and hopefully by the time it ends, people walk away with some sort of like more questions, than they came with, so that we can all kind of like explore it in our own ways and what that means. Because I think it's such a huge question that I don't think it can be answered on that Tuesday evening, unfortunately.
Indeed.
Which might be disappointing for some people, but I think it's a conversation that we should be having on an ongoing process. For me, I feel,
Yeah, even if you don't get the answers on the day, but it is a conversation that must happen, that must take place. Now, Atambile, speak to us about your role in the discussion, and what is it that you hope to achieve from it?
Well, I think from my background, I'm a researcher, and I think it's just adding to the conversation about the kind of work that I've been doing. I'm mostly looking at sort of decolonizing, looking at what are the voices that have been missing. So there's this idea that what is decolonizing, what is the work that has been done, but the conversation needs to widen and add more voices. So by looking at research on black women writers, which is the work that I'm doing, I'm hoping to add to that and say, let's open up the conversation, add more voices to the conversation. And black women writers are often left out of the conversation, as we've seen over time. So hopefully share some examples and share some other views that are often left out of the conversation.
Let me put your head on the block for a bit here. What is a decolonized Africa, and are we there yet?
Well, I think that depends on so many things. We're not there yet, definitely not. I think we're still very much colonized. We're here, three black people having a conversation, so that already tells us that there's quite a dominance of Englishness in our lives. What is a decolonized Africa? I think that differs from person to person. I think in my space, it's about having ideas, a festival of ideas, where we're not just having one voice of people. And for the past, a couple of centuries, it's been white male voices that have been in the forefront of that. And we are saying, actually, let's open up and have more voices in that conversation and looking at what history tells us. And the truth is, this is an old conversation, actually, about a decolonized Africa. It started, I think, around the time of many African states' independence. And I think we're just, in South Africa, it feels like we're joining that conversation. And even though there was a bit of an arrested development there, but this has been something that's been happening since the 50s, 60s. So it's not new. In fact, even before the 60s, maybe even in the early 1900s, where people were just like, how do we deal with the complexity of having other influences on this continent and making space for other people? And that's the conversation, I think.
This conversation has been going on for quite a while now, and where are we in terms of finding the answers that we so desperately need, insofar as getting to know whether, how far are we from a decolonized Africa?
I mean, I completely agree with what she's saying. I think that for me, it's not only just a conversation that needs to be sorted out now, because I think every generation has to have its own ideas of what it means to exist in a decolonized Africa. And I think for me, this Tuesday discussion is about how we, the sort of like the generation that we both come from, and what do we see as that decolonized Africa. So I hope that it never comes to an end, because it will be different for the next generation. And I think it's important to have this conversation again when, the sort of like context has changed.
Sure. And what role does literature play in the formation of ideas, especially in the era of social media?
I mean, I think, I have a sense that social media for me works hand in hand with literature. I mean, I think You know, there's often an idea that social media is hateful to literature, and I completely disagree. I think that what social media has done for literature has been amazing, because you kind of get to share things that you are reading. I mean, my reason for going on Twitter or Facebook is to see what people are reading. You know, and that for me is the possibility of what social media can do for literature. So I think, you know, literature and social media go hand in hand for me, and I think social media has allowed for this kind of like conversations to carry on, but also allowed for people to share what they are reading and what sort of like what the conversation they're having with their friends or at work, or the, you know, the research that you are doing, and it's possible to share that with people. And I think, you know, social media has helped a lot in that sense, I feel. Yeah.
And I'm going to ask this question to the both of you. What role do all these hashtags, for example, bring back the land, fees must fall, men are trash, not all men, Black Lives Matter, etc., etc. What do these hashtags play in a, you know, in a decolonize in the minds of the hashtag generation?
Well, I think it just tells us that people are having these conversations, and it tells us that people are asking questions, and the hashtag, I guess, is what's happening on Twitter, and you know, people have dubbed it as Black Twitter, and it says that black people are having these conversations, and I think it's part of the conversation, the broader conversation that we're having, that we're having conversations in our schools, our churches, on social media, and various platforms, and hopefully at some point some of those conversations will be taken seriously and actually kind of ultimately become something in the end.
All right. In 15 seconds, we haven't got much time. Little money?
I mean, so for me, the idea behind hashtag is to really kind of like capture people's hopes in a way. So the hashtag present a sort of an idea that this is where we want to get to.
Okay.
So what we're doing now is the work to get to that point.
All right. All right. Thanks to you two for joining us. It's been a great pleasure having you on the show. Well, that was our award-winning writer, filmmaker and photographer Mqombothi. With him is journalist and blogger, activist Atambile Masola. Now, the pair have been roped in an attempt to answer the question, what is a decolonized Africa? And they will answer that pertinent question from a young writer's perspective on the 13th and 14th of June at the Joburg Theatre and Soweto Theatres. Well, this is Morning Live. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back.